going back to the educational environment, and your experience in that, and then the firefighter environment, paramedic environment, and your experience in that. If you had to pick, and I know these are questions that are just coming to me as you talk, so I know these weren't sent to you ahead of time, but I'm a phenomenologist, so I like throwing stuff out and having you deal with it in real time. Uh,
Right.
um, um, but if you had to pick one leader within the education realm that really transformed your thinking, who would that be, and what were the qualities? And if you could go into an experience with that person, and then similarly, a leader that really impacted you in your experience with the fire department and as a paramedic, and what their characteristics and their qualities were. I don't know if you mind sharing that. I think that would be very interesting for me to hear.
Sure. I would say now, if you're talking about instructor, I mean, I've had a lot of educational figures in my life. Well, everybody you learn from is an instructor in some way, shape, or form. But in the classroom, I would have to say David Whitfield was probably the guy that I found the most transformational. Now, there are a lot of factors that go into that. For instance, he was the first of the doctoral instructors I met, and I'm coming onto campus, and I'm feeling like I got the big brain going on. I'm bringing my 4.0, and I'm going to drop some knowledge on these people, and I'm going to show them
I
what I got
love it.
going on. So I show up and I meet with Dr. Whitfield early before class, and we're sitting in the lobby of Tilford and having just a conversation, and I'm just talking about all kinds of stuff and things I've been thinking, and he's got that furrowed brow and he's looking at me and he's kind of leaning forward and listening intently, and I get done talking and he says, "You need to read more." And that was really all he said. And I'm like, okay, this is very cryptic. It's, I feel like, is this some sensei thing that I've got to uh, uh, decipher on my own? And it wasn't until about the next morning, I think, when I woke up, when I'm like, that jerk called me stupid. But the thing was, when we got to class that night, that same night, after that, before I had had this epiphany, um, we're sitting in the room, and the desks are in a horseshoe, and I sat in the middle of the horseshoe. Thank goodness I sat in the middle of the horseshoe, because people started talking. Now, this was an elective class, so it's usually one of the classes people take late on in the program, but I went for an early semester, so I jumped into an elective class, and everybody in there is in their 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th class. I'm in my first class, and they're talking about the NGOs that they've worked with and the countries that they've lived in and all of this stuff. And this is when I realized that I have not lived outside of a 10-mile circle. My
Mm.
entire life, outside of vacations and what has been spent in a 10-mile circle. And I'm like, oh man, I don't know anything. I Fortunately, by the time it came to me, I was very brief and very humble. If I'd have been the first one to talk, I'd have been spouting all this stuff, and that would have prompted more of that "you need to read." And yeah, so it goes by, and I'm going back to the dorm room that night, and I'm thinking, how do I get my money back? How do I get out? I'm way over my head. I can't do this. This is impossible. And but through the pain of all of that was great learning experiences. I did learn that, yes, indeed, I need to read a lot more than I was reading. I need to get outside of my comfort zone as far as books. I need to find out what the rest of the world is doing and what they've written about it. And that prompted me to read hundreds and hundreds of books after that, because I didn't want to be the one that was unengaged. I didn't want to be the one that had the myopic viewpoints. I wanted to be the one who was able to be conversant in many groups. And Whitfield really fostered that in me. And I think that was a wonderful thing. Now, in the fire service, I can't really I can pick a couple out in the fire service, but more because we saw eye to eye on things, and that's not really a good learning experience.
Mm.
My best learning experience came when I was working ambulance, and one of the managers there, again, a very autocratic, dictatorial way of doing things. There's this hierarchy and what, but he was very big on personal growth, and he actually was the first one that introduced me to some different books. I was very much about, this is what we need to have, and here's how we get there. And I may not have been the most diplomatic person in getting there. So he walked in one day and dropped a book on my desk, and it was How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh yeah,
Which,
classic. Mhm.
yeah, not very Machiavellian in that if you want this, you do this. It's that here's how your approach to things can affect the way people perceive you. It was the first time I read a book that was along those lines. And I thought he was a jerk for doing that, but he actually was helping me along. And he had a habit of doing things like that, periodically um, uh, bringing in something that might be a little painful in a loving friendship way. I mean, we would go fishing together, we would go drink beer together, but he was able to have those conversations with me that were a little more painful, but helped me with some personal growth. I don't think I would be sitting in a classroom being able to teach people today if I hadn't had that. I certainly would have been able to do the training aspect that the fire department requires or that paramedics require, but the teaching, the education, the helping people grow, I don't think I would have been able to do that. I'd have been a good purveyor of information and not a good personal growth person. And I like to think that I've come a long ways in that regard. So I have both of those people to thank for that. But both of them are along the same lines. That manager in the medical, in the ambulance, was not somebody who was typical of that end of the industry in an autocratic, dictatorial, hierarchical position. He was not somebody who played position power very much.
Hmm.
So I think the one thing I have taken from the fire service is that works really good for that, but it doesn't work very good in the rest of the world. It's not going to foster growth in the rest of the world. And maybe we need to get outside of that. When I sit in class and I talk about some of the things that I talk about, I know there's people that look at me and go, "You're not a firefighter. That's not how they do things. That's not how they talk about things," which I kind of take as a compliment because it means I've kind of broken out of that mold of I'm going to tell you how it is and you just believe that.